You couldn't find anyone more naive than my daughter-in-law? Gabriella snorted. She works nonstop while we live on her money. She didn't know I was standing just down the hallway, but I heard every smug word. That night, I froze the joint credit cards and called a moving crew. My husband and his sainted mother were going to find out what it felt like to be evicted. But let me take you back, because it didn't start with shouting, it started with a handshake. It was March, and I was at a construction expo in Dallas. My company, small but solid, needed new tile suppliers. I was flipping through a vendor catalog when I felt it, that sense of being watched. I looked up and locked eyes with a man in a sharp suit and polished confidence. "Ethan Phelps," he said, offering a card. "Developer. Let me guess. You're a designer?" I laughed. "Julia Mason. I own a residential contracting firm. I'm here for material sourcing, not compliments." "Fair enough," he smiled. "But since we're both here for business, maybe we grab a coffee. I've got a few development proposals you might find interesting." We sat in a cafe tucked inside the expo center. He told me about his projects: a condo complex near the suburbs, a planned townhome community. He dropped numbers, names, timelines. He sounded legit. "So, how long have you been in the business?" I asked. 5 years, he said. "Started from nothing, but we're scaling up. You might have heard of Phelps Developments?" I hadn't, but I smiled politely. "There are 100 builders in Dallas, and most come and go." 7 years for me, I said. Started doing apartment remodels. Now we handle entire custom home builds. The conversation was easy. He wasn't pushy like some guys I'd met at these things. No over-the-top flirtation, just smart, calm energy. "Want to grab dinner sometime?" he asked as we stood to leave. "There's a great spot just a few blocks from here." I hesitated. My life had become all work and zero fun for the last few years. But something about him, he felt safe, grounded. "Sure," I said. Dinner turned into a few more dinners, then weekend brunches, then evenings at art shows and jazz clubs. He told me he lived with his mom, who raised him alone after his dad passed. I shared my plans for the company, my dream of building my own home someday. "You and me," he said one night, glass of red in hand. "We're cut from the same cloth. Builders, survivors, self-made." And maybe that's what hooked me. I saw a mirror, or thought I did. Weeks flew by, and I started letting my guard down. Then, one slow Friday, I ran a search for his company. Not out of suspicion, just habit. I vet every vendor, every subcontractor. Why not him? The results? Strange. The website was bare bones. No client reviews, no press. Just 3 mediocre projects, none recent. I called Chris, an old friend who works in commercial architecture. "Ever heard of Phelps Developments? Guy named Ethan Phelps?" "Nope," he said. "You thinking of hiring him?" "Not yet. Just checking." He called back 10 minutes later. "So, it's a registered business, but there's no major permits, no commercial filings. It's basically a shell, just him listed, and a startup capital of like $5,000. That sick drop in my stomach? Yeah, I felt it. So he was embellishing, lying maybe, but I told myself it wasn't a deal breaker. Lots of guys inflate their resumes, especially in construction. Still, I needed answers. At our next dinner, I asked, casual as I could, "When do I get to see one of your builds?" He blinked, then laughed. "Oh, everything's still in pre-approval. The city's dragging their heels on permits. Classic red tape." It sounded rehearsed, but maybe it wasn't. I gave him the benefit of the doubt. I wouldn't make that mistake again. That summer, our relationship finally started to feel truly serious. Ethan often stayed over at my place. We were already discussing going on vacation together, making plans for the future. He was attentive and caring. He remembered the little things and supported me in everything I did. One evening, as we were lying on the couch in my apartment, he quietly said, "You know, what if we got married?" I looked up from my laptop and smiled. "Seriously?" I asked. "Absolutely. I want to spend my life with you. You're smart, beautiful, driven. Women like you are rare." My heart began to beat faster. I was 32 and had never been married. I devoted myself to my career. But with Ethan, everything felt natural. "Yes," I whispered. "I want that." He hugged me and added, "We'll have a beautiful wedding. I want you to have the best memories." We started planning right away. He suggested a modest ceremony at City Hall and a reception for 60 guests at a cozy restaurant. I don't like flashy weddings, he said. Better we invest in the honeymoon. Go to Italy, see the world. I agreed. I didn't want anything noisy or pretentious either. But when we started talking about money, things seemed odd. Listen, darling, he said, flipping through invoices from the florist and catering company. All my money is tied up in a project right now. Very promising, but the funds are currently frozen. Maybe you could pay for the wedding and I'll reimburse you later? I frowned. What project? A residential complex on the outskirts. Serious investor. But until we get the permits, the money can't be released. It's an investment in our future. Once it gets going, we'll be set. I knew how the construction business worked. Large projects often required time and capital, especially if everything was official. So I agreed but asked for documentation. I want to see what kind of property is it? He hesitated. They're with the partners right now. The rights are with the lawyers. As soon as everything's finalized, I'll show you. At first, he forgot the documents. His partner was on a business trip. Then they were under review. I gradually stopped insisting, getting caught up in the pre-wedding hustle. The wedding itself went well. My future mother-in-law, Gabriella Phelps, made a good impression. A quiet, well-mannered 58-year-old woman, a former accountant from the neighborhood. Over dinner, she mentioned, "You're the daughter-in-law I always dreamed of. Ethan's a good one, even if he's a bit scatterbrained. But between the two of you, you've got enough brains." After the wedding, we stayed in my apartment, a spacious, bright place with 2 bedrooms. I had spent years making it feel like home, investing both heart and money into it, and the two of us were comfortable there. Ethan seemed to be perfectly fine with it too, cozy, in a good neighborhood, not far from downtown. We started discussing where to go for our honeymoon, how to split the expenses, even made some joint savings plans. But a couple of weeks later, he came home looking worried. "Mom's blood pressure is all over the place," he said. "She says she's dizzy, barely sleeping. I'm really concerned. She's all alone. What if something happens again?" I nodded sympathetically. His mother, Gabriella, did seem like a fragile woman. At the wedding, she appeared quiet, refined, and a bit tired. Maybe, Ethan hesitated, maybe she could stay with us for a while, just until she recovers. The spare room's free. She has no one else. I hesitated. Of course, I hadn't dreamed of living with my mother-in-law right after getting married. But it also felt wrong to say no. It was his mother, his family, and the apartment did have enough space. "All right," I said. "She can move in, but only as long as she really needs to." "Of course," he said happily. "She won't be a bother. She really respects you." We moved her things in the next day. At first, everything was calm. She stayed in bed, took her medication, read, and thanked me for taking care of her. But gradually, the idea of temporary began to lose its clear boundaries. Gabriella gave a faint smile. "Julia, you're such a gem. I'll get back on my feet quickly. I promise I won't be a burden." That same evening, Ethan said, "Listen, let Mom stay with us for now. You've got 2 bedrooms. There's enough space for everyone, just until she's stronger." I hesitated but nodded. Of course, she's family. The next day, Gabriella seemed much livelier. She made breakfast, cleaned up, hummed something in the kitchen. "How are you feeling?" I asked. "Oh, much better. Probably just got a bit overwhelmed. Age, blood pressure, all that. But the main thing is, you're both here." A week went by. Gabriella was quite active, but showed no signs of wanting to leave. On the contrary, she kept saying, "It's so nice being together. Why rent a separate place? This is comfortable and economical." Ethan agreed. "She's right. What's the rush? It's only temporary anyway." But temporary kept dragging on. All the bills were falling on me. Groceries, utilities, appliances, even a new couch that just looks perfect in our living room, as Gabriella put it. I tried not to complain. After all, it was my apartment, my space, and supposedly I was still in control. But the feeling that I was being gently pushed out of my own life grew stronger every day. Meanwhile, Ethan was working on his project. He'd leave every morning in a suit and come back in the evening, irritable. "How's the project going?" I'd ask. "Slow, permits, paperwork, but soon. One day, I finished work early and decided to drop by his office. He had said the company was based in a business complex on Jefferson Ave. I went there, but no one in the building had heard of such a firm. What floor? The security guard asked. I don't know. I've worked here for 2 years. I know all the tenants. Ethan? Nope, never heard of him. A chill ran down my spine. He had been lying. I called Ethan. Hey babe, where are you right now? At the construction site, north side of town. Why? I was thinking of stopping by your office. Grabbing lunch together? Ugh, not a good day. Total chaos with the subcontractors. I'm buried. Let's just catch up at home later, okay? Something in his voice was off, too quick, like he was pre-rehearsed. A week later, the truth started to crack open. I was driving downtown for a client meeting and spotted someone near the entrance of a mall. It was Ethan, in jeans and a t-shirt, casually walking inside. It was 1:30 p.m. on a weekday. My chest tightened. Maybe he was on break? Maybe a client meeting at one of the mall cafes? I parked and followed. I checked the cafes, the food court, even the arcade on the second floor. Nothing. Then I saw him, at the theater box office, alone, buying a ticket for a midday showing, popcorn, Coke, zero urgency. My world tilted. That evening over dinner, I asked, how's the project going? Any updates with the contractors? He didn't look up from his plate. Bit of progress, still messy. Got meetings all day tomorrow? He lied. I knew it in my bones. The next day, I followed him. He left the apartment in his usual dress shirt and messenger bag, playing the part. But he didn't head north to any work site. He drove downtown again. Same mall. This time, he met a friend in a coffee shop. They were laughing, chatting about football. No laptops, no documents, no business. That night, I confronted him. We need to talk, I said. About what? He turned on the TV, settled on the couch. About your job. I saw you today. At the mall? In a cafe? With a friend? He froze, remote in hand. Okay, I'll be honest. The project's on hold. The investor backed out. I've been out of work for a while. How long? 4 months. 4 months. But you've been talking about meetings, contractors, deadlines. I didn't want to worry you. I thought I'd find something fast. I'm trying, meeting people, following leads. I wanted to believe him. Really. We hugged. He thanked me for understanding. But another month passed. Nothing changed. Still. Leads, still talks, but no interviews. No job. I offered him a position at my firm, sales coordinator, good salary. No thanks, he said quickly. I'm used to being my own boss. I'll figure it out. That stung. Then came the final straw. He asked for 1,200, said it was for medical checks and certifications for a new job. I was relieved. Finally, a breakthrough. But days later, I found a folded paper in his jacket, an unemployment status certificate. Dated 6 months ago. 6? He'd never had a job, not when we met, not when we got married. And then I saw the pattern. Where did his money come from? The dinners? The gifts? He and his mom had been living off me. Worse, I discovered a listing online, selling the brand new phone I gave his mom just yesterday. $500. Barely used, gift from daughter-in-law. I confronted her. She fumbled a ridiculous excuse. Oh, that? My friend posted it as a joke. I told her to take it down. I didn't argue. I just turned, walked out of the kitchen, and closed the door behind me. At dinner, no one even mentioned the phone call. Gabriella talked as if everything were perfectly normal, about work, the weather, weekend plans. Maybe we should stop by the mall, she suggested. I need a new dress. And Ethan could use a shirt for work. For what job? I asked, looking at my husband. He silently cut his meat, not lifting his eyes. Nothing yet, he replied, but I have an interview scheduled. I need to look presentable. I felt a wave of exhaustion, yet another excuse to spend. I was living in a home where everything revolved around my money. Purchases, decisions, bills. The next day, I decided it was time to act. I sat down at the computer and reviewed our family accounts. Over the past 3 months, our expenses had nearly doubled our income. If this continued, all our savings would be gone in 6 months. Then what? Loans? Debt? And Ethan? Judging by his behavior, he had no intention of working. Why bother if your wife pays for everything? That evening, he came home calm and relaxed. How was your day? I asked rehearsed. Great, he said. Second interview tomorrow. I think they'll hire me. Ethan, I said, I called the company. They didn't have any interviews scheduled today. He froze as if hit. You called them? He asked. I have contacts there. I just checked, I said calmly. Well, maybe it was a different department. I told you. Ethan, I raised my voice. We need to have a serious talk. About what? He asked, surprised. About the future. About how you've been unemployed for over a year, and it looks like you're not even looking for a job, just pretending, spending my money. He sighed heavily and sat down. I'm trying, he said quietly. I'll find something decent. When? I asked again. In 2 or 3 months? And if you don't? I asked directly. He frowned. I will. I'll find something for sure. Aren't you ashamed of living off your wife? I asked. His frown deepened. It's temporary, just until I find something that suits me. 2 or 3 months, Ethan. If you don't find a job in that time, I'll know. You just don't want to change anything. He said nothing. I knew. The conversation had gone in circles. He found comfort in silence instead of taking action. Fine, I said quietly. 1 month. Just one. You'll see my decision then. The next day, I decided to cut the family off from my money. I opened a new account and transferred the majority of my funds there. I left only a small amount in the old one for essentials like food, utilities, and gas. 3 days later, Gabriella was already complaining. Julia, something's wrong with the card. I tried to buy a dress, and they said there weren't enough funds. How much was the dress? I asked. $300, she replied, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. 300? That's too much, I said, trying to stay calm. There's money on the card for food and necessary expenses. A dress is not essential. She looked offended, biting her lip. Well, all right, I said. If it's a large purchase, check with me first. And what counts as large? Ethan asked. Anything over $50, I replied firmly. They exchanged glances. Gabriella cautiously said, That's fair. I was sitting in the office, working on the budget for a new project, when an unknown number called. Good afternoon, this is Melissa Phelps. I'm the wife of Ethan's brother, Greg Phelps. I froze. Ethan had never mentioned having a brother. I'm sorry, but I didn't know Ethan had a brother. They barely talk, she replied. But I found your number through mutual contacts. We need to meet. It's important. There was a strange mix of anxiety and determination in her voice. 2 hours later, we met at a cafe near my office. Melissa was around 30, looked tired and anxious. She ordered only tea and nervously twisted a napkin in her hands. Sorry for the suddenness, she began, but I can't stay silent any longer. Greg and I have been trapped for 2 years. In what way? I asked, wary. Gabriella, your mother-in-law, is deceiving both you and us. She pulled out her phone and showed me a photo. In it, Gabriella was hugging a man who looked strikingly like Ethan. This is Greg, my husband, Gabriella's older son from her first marriage, and Ethan is from the second. She hides that but that's not the point. We're living in her second apartment, the one she supposedly sold. In reality, she just transferred it to my name to hide the asset. And the money? She gives us cash, regularly. Says it's temporary until Greg finds a job, but he hasn't worked in 3 years. I was stunned. But where does she get the money from? I asked. Melissa gave a bitter smile. Don't you see? She brags to all her friends that her younger son found a real gold mine, a wealthy, hardworking, trusting woman. I felt my stomach turn. So this was all planned? Of course, she nodded. She designed the whole scheme. Ethan was supposed to marry a rich woman, convince her to move in with Mom, and then gradually get her to pay for everything for the good of the family. I went through the same thing. And why are you telling me all this? I asked. Because I'm done. I found a job, I want to rent my own place, start living honestly, but Greg refuses to leave his mother. He says, why should I? Everything's convenient as it is. And she encourages him. She teaches both of them, Ethan and Greg, how to milk money from their wives, how to never fully admit to deception, how to pretend everything is just temporary. I remembered how Ethan always had justifications for his spending, how Gabriella acted hurt whenever I declined a pricey purchase. Everything suddenly made sense. Do you have any proof? I asked. Just my word, Melissa replied. But she talks about it with her friend, Linda Weiss, almost every night. for hours on the phone. I made a mental note of the name. Thank you, Melissa. That explains a lot. Don't thank me. I'm just tired of staying quiet. You don't deserve any of this. You work hard, and they're just using you. From that day on, the house grew colder. Ethan spoke less. Gabriella gave one-word answers and sighed a lot. I realized I was no longer seen as part of the family, but as a controller. The month I had given Ethan to find a job was coming to an end, and nothing had happened. His new contacts never turned into offers. I knew I was living with someone who was comfortable living off my back. That evening, I didn't start a fight. I acted calmly, with a plan. The next day, I went to the employment office, pretending I needed a certificate for the bank. I gave the name Mason Ethan, and they confirmed. Yes, he had been registered as unemployed for 8 months. He was receiving benefits but barely attending interviews. He claimed he was only looking for management positions. My heart sank. That meant our entire romance had been a lie. He talked about a construction company, big projects, but in reality, there was nothing behind him. When I got home and he was asleep, I checked his wallet. Inside was Gabriella's card. I picked up her phone. He often left it on the kitchen counter without a passcode, and opened her online banking. What I saw killed any last doubt. For the past 8 months, her account had been used for restaurants, gifts, entertainment, everything that could be passed off as family expenses. And why would an elderly woman have such spending? I dug deeper. 2 years ago, her account received a large deposit, $200,000, apparently from the sale of a house. So she had another property, which she sold. In that moment, it became clear. Ethan had been living off his mother for years, and now the two of them had set their sights on me, the wealthy wife. I put the phone down, closed the browser, and exhaled deeply. I knew then it was no longer just time to defend myself, it was time to fight back. I closed the laptop and sat on the couch in the dark. I had been deliberately deceived. He had carefully chosen me, a financially secure woman, to live off. And the most bitter part, I had allowed myself to be deceived, believed the sweet words, didn't check basic facts, and agreed to everything. That evening, I decided it was time for a serious conversation. Ethan, I said, we need to talk about work, plans, our future. He set his phone aside and looked at me, surprised. Of course, darling. About what exactly? I was at the employment office yesterday, I continued. You've been registered as unemployed for 8 months. That means you weren't working even before we met. He fell silent, his eyes lowering. So all this time, you lied about your projects? Yes, he admitted quietly. It was a lie. Why did you do that? I asked. Did you think I wouldn't believe you if I knew the truth? I wanted to get a job first and then explain everything. He tried to justify. And what were you living on? The gifts, the restaurants, the trips? I pressed. He said nothing. So here it is. Either you start working soon or our relationship ends. He tried to argue, said he was trying, but there was uncertainty and irritation in his voice, anger at being accused. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay next to him thinking how quickly all my illusions had collapsed. Not long ago, I believed I had married the man he seemed to be. Now I saw I was lying next to someone who had lived off other people's success for years. At breakfast the next morning, Gabriella acted like nothing had happened, smiling, suggesting a weekend trip, asking about my plans. And I just looked at her in silence, thinking, she knows. He must have told her everything last night. And yet she still played the role of the caring mother-in-law, asking about dresses, plans, and budgets. In that moment, it became crystal clear they were working as a team. He was the struggling husband, she the kind, supportive mother. In reality, a well-crafted scheme to drain my resources. A week later, she announced that her phone was broken. The screen cracked, buttons not working. I need a new one, she said. An iPhone, the latest model. Only $800. I looked at her old phone. The corner was slightly chipped, but the device worked perfectly. Maybe just repair it? I offered. No, she said. A new one's better. It'll last for years. I sighed and paid for the phone. Gabriella beamed. My virtuous daughter-in-law, she said. But the next day, I saw an ad. iPhone, almost new. Unopened box, pickup. 350, Maple Saint, app to earn 12. The phone I had just bought. I called the number in the ad. Yes, it's still available, a cheerful voice replied. Brand new. Still in the box. I hung up and sank onto the couch. Everything was clear now. No one's phone had broken. It was all part of an elaborate scam. After the meeting, I sat in my car, unable to move. Everything inside me was in turmoil. This wasn't just a mistake. I had been made the victim of a carefully planned con. And worse, I had walked right into it, believing stories about a sick mother-in-law and temporary hardships. The next day, I decided to verify Melissa's words. That evening, when the house had quieted down, I listened in on my mother-in-law, Gabriella. She was on the phone for a long time, and I stood quietly by her door. I heard familiar phrases. Of course, Ethan did well. Found a wife who works, earns money. But her attitude's getting worse, turning stingy. You need to teach her. The important thing is that Ethan supports her. He understands. He supports his mother. I quietly stepped away. It was all confirmed. They were discussing me as a source of income and preparing the next phase of the scheme. A week later, Ethan said, "We have a meeting with investors. I want you to be there. They need to see that you're a good fit for the project." I asked for details. Who are these investors? Ethan first made up some business acquaintances, but that evening, I called Melissa. Melissa, did Ethan mention anything about a meeting with investors? No, she answered after a pause. Greg said it's part of the scam. He's trying to get you to invest. There are no real partners. I felt the rage rise inside me, but I agreed to attend the meeting, to see for myself. At the restaurant, Ethan introduced me to two men, Adam Carlson and Samuel Pierce. They talked about a suburban housing project and proposed an investment of $200,000, with $75,000 needed upfront to show commitment. I asked to see documents, but was told they're with the lawyers for review. After the meeting, I searched online, but found no mention of any companies linked to Adam or Samuel. So I hired a private investigator to look into their identities and addresses. 3 days later, the truth came out. Adam Carlson was a taxi driver and Samuel Pierce was unemployed. There was no investment firm behind them. That confirmed my suspicions. Ethan was planning a scam using fake associates to extract money from me. The next day, Ethan announced the contract was ready and that I needed to transfer the money immediately, $75,000 in cash, to prove our seriousness. I nodded, but I already knew what I was going to do. On the day of the meeting, I withdrew the amount from my account and deposited it into a hidden bank account he didn't know about. Then I headed to the restaurant with an empty bag. When they asked, "Did you bring the startup capital?" I smiled. "Show me the documents first." They opened a folder and flipped through pages, but small inconsistencies gave them away immediately. Mismatched names on IDs and contracts, addresses that didn't line up. Ethan turned pale. "These are fake associates," I said. "You tried to scam me." They tried to leave, but I stood and said, "No need for explanations. Everything's already clear." I walked out of the restaurant, leaving them to argue among themselves. One thing I knew for certain, I would no longer be anyone's victim. When I heard Gabriella insulting me over the phone, calling me a workhorse and a gullible fool, I knew I couldn't take it anymore. That was the last straw. I quietly walked into the room, took my phone, and immediately blocked all the bank cards Ethan and his mother had access to. Then I called a moving company. I need the belongings of 2 people packed and moved. Clothes, documents, small electronics. "We'll be there in an hour," they replied. Next, I called a locksmith. "I need the locks in my apartment changed today." "No problem. We'll come this evening," they said. When Ethan came home, I was already packing his things into boxes. He looked shocked and asked, "What's going on?" "You and your mother, you're moving out. Today." "What do you mean, moving out?" he exclaimed. At that moment, Gabriella burst into the room. "No one is going anywhere," she yelled. "Do what you should have done long ago," I said calmly. "I'm evicting you." The movers were already in the hallway. I pointed to the boxes. "These ones. I'll give you the delivery address." "Julia, are you insane?" he shouted. "I've made my decision. You either leave now or your things go out the window, and I'll call the police." I was cold, composed, and unwavering. He tried to grab my arm, but I pulled away sharply. "Don't touch me. If you do, I'm calling the police." Gabriella suddenly panicked. "Where will we go?" "To that second apartment you supposedly sold. I said. How do you know? She whispered. Melissa told me. I know all about your schemes. I replied firmly. The movers quickly carried everything out. Ethan and Gabriella stood in the now empty room, stunned. Let's talk. Like adults, he suggested. There's nothing to discuss. You both lied to me from day one. But I love you, he tried. No, you love my wallet. You saw me as a sponsor, not a wife. Gabriella chimed in. Maybe we went too far. No, I said firmly. Pack up and leave. The locksmiths are coming at 7 p.m. What about documents? Money? He asked. Your documents are already packed. As for money, all the cards are blocked. He silently held out his hand. At least give me something for the road. No, but here's 20. That's the last thing you'll get from me. And the divorce? He asked quietly. I'm filing tomorrow. It'll be quick. We have no joint assets. They walked out slowly. At the door, Gabriella turned back. You'll regret this. Who would ever want such a difficult wife? That's your problem, I replied. Now leave. The door shut. I was alone in the apartment, which suddenly felt enormous and eerily empty. I sat on the couch. In an instant, my life had collapsed. A marriage built on lies was over. I was no longer a sponsor, no longer a victim. Later, Ethan called. Julia, we arrived at Melissa's. I just want to say you were cruel. Cruel? You lied to me for a year. We just didn't tell you everything. You said you were an entrepreneur. You're unemployed. You lived off others. I promise I'll find a job. I don't care anymore. The trust is gone. There's no going back. I hit end call and blocked his number. By 7 p.m., the locksmiths came and changed the locks. In that moment, I realized one thing. From now on, no one enters my home without my permission.